When nations trade, it is never just about the product being shipped across borders. On the surface, it might appear like a simple transaction, one side growing a surplus and the other side filling a need. But beneath that surface lies the real battlefield: influence, dependence, and control. Every grain, every deal, every signed contract carries a hidden weight. It is not about what's on the table. It's about who gets to dictate the rules of the table. Think about it: corn is corn, yellow, nutritious, and versatile. But when it moves across oceans under the banner of international trade, it transforms into leverage. The seller holds power if the buyer cannot do without it. That power stretches beyond economics into politics, policies, and even national identity. A country that allows its staple foods to be controlled by outside forces is essentially handing over a portion of its independence. This is why the question of buying or not buying is never as simple as numbers in a ledger. It's about whether a nation chooses to prioritize its own resilience over short-term convenience. Cheap imports might look attractive, but they come with invisible strings. Relying too heavily on a foreign source for essentials can weaken local farmers, dismantle rural economies, and create a cycle of dependency that is almost impossible to break. The immediate gain masks the long-term cost. Food security is not just about having enough to eat. It's about ensuring that the source of that food is stable, within reach, and under one's own command. When a country grows its own, it controls its destiny. When it depends on another, it exposes itself to manipulation. Suddenly, foreign policies start to influence domestic ones. Suddenly, decisions made in another capital city affect the lives of millions back home. Every nation has to ask, what's at stake if we surrender control over what our people eat? The answer is more than money. It's dignity, sovereignty, and the ability to stand tall on the global stage. By choosing to cultivate its own fields, a country isn't just producing crops. It's producing confidence, stability, and independence. So the discussion isn't about rejecting a specific grain or turning away from trade. It's about recognizing the bigger picture. It's about realizing that every trade deal is a negotiation of power, not just goods. To keep control over its future, a nation must protect its foundations. Food is one of those foundations, and those who secure their own harvest secure their own strength. Throughout history, the nations that have thrived the most are the ones that built their strength from within, rather than leaning on others to supply their basic needs. Dependency may feel convenient in the short term. It offers an easy way out, a faster solution, and sometimes even lower costs. But hidden beneath that comfort lies a dangerous vulnerability. When a country depends too much on external forces, it hands over not just its market, but also its freedom to choose. True strength comes from within. When people cultivate their own resources, they not only meet their needs, but also create a cycle of empowerment. Farmers thrive, industries grow, and communities feel secure. Every seed planted on local soil is more than just agriculture. It's a declaration of resilience. It tells the world, we can stand on our own feet, Consider what happens when dependency grows unchecked. A shift in global politics, a trade dispute, or even a sudden crisis can bring an entire system to its knees. Prices skyrocket, shortages spread fear, and the most vulnerable are hit hardest. Nations that once enjoyed comfort find themselves begging for what should have been secured at home. Dependency is a silent chain. It doesn't hurt until it tightens, but by then it's often too late. On the other hand, when a nation chooses self-reliance, it writes its own future. It creates jobs for its people, builds industries that can compete globally, and strengthens its backbone against outside pressures. Every grain harvested locally, every product manufactured domestically, is a shield against instability. It keeps wealth circulating within the nation instead of bleeding outward. It protects culture and sustains traditions, ensuring that progress does not erase identity. Self-reliance is not isolation. It doesn't mean closing doors to trade or refusing to collaborate with the world. It means entering those relationships from a position of strength, not desperation. When you don't need what others are selling, you negotiate with confidence. You decide the terms instead of accepting them. That is true independence, not just political, but economic and social as well. At its core, the choice between building within and depending on others is the choice between vulnerability and security, between being a follower and being a leader. A nation that relies on itself may take longer to reach its goals, but the foundation it lays will be unshakable. In contrast, a nation that leans too heavily on outside support may rise quickly, but it risks collapsing just as fast when that support is withdrawn. The future belongs to those who invest in their own people, their own land, and their own potential. By trusting in what they can grow, produce, and build, they create a legacy that no foreign supplier can control. That is how stability is secured, and that is how nations rise with unbreakable confidence. When we look at international trade, it's tempting to focus only on the visible numbers. The cost per ton, the price on the invoice, the savings at the surface. But what looks like a bargain today can carry hidden costs that stretch far beyond the balance sheet. The true value of a product is not just in the money exchanged, but in the ripple effects it creates across jobs, communities, and even national sovereignty. A shipment that appears cheap at first glance may actually come at the expense of local industries. When imports flood the market at lower prices, domestic producers are often unable to compete. Farmers lose income, factories shut down, and livelihoods are destroyed. That cheaper product, therefore, carries the hidden price of unemployment and declining rural economies. A nation that chooses the cheaper option may pay far more in the long run as it tries to recover from the collapse of its own production base. There is also the cost of dependency. Relying too heavily on outside sources creates a cycle of vulnerability. What happens when the global market shifts, when political tensions rise, or when supply chains break down? Suddenly, the once cheap import becomes unavailable or drastically more expensive, and the country that depended on it is left scrambling. The apparent savings turn into a heavy liability, proving that cost cannot be measured in currency alone. Cultural and social costs also matter. Food, for example, is not just a commodity. It carries tradition, heritage, and identity. When cheaper imports replace local produce, it doesn't just affect farmers. It chips away at cultural practices and dietary habits that have been passed down for generations. A nation risks losing a part of its identity for the sake of temporary affordability. And then there is the strategic cost. Whoever controls your essentials, your food, your fuel, your resources, controls your future. A cheap price tag can become a tool of leverage. Decisions in global trade are rarely just about commerce, they are about influence. If a country becomes overly dependent on another for its basics, it may find its policies swayed, its independence compromised, and its voice weakened on the world stage. That is a cost far greater than any economic calculation. True value must therefore be measured differently. It includes the health of local industries, the strength of employment, the resilience of supply chains, and the preservation of sovereignty. A product grown and produced locally might carry a higher sticker price, but its benefits ripple through the economy, uplifting families, strengthening communities, and fortifying national stability. The lesson is clear. The lowest price is not always the best deal. Nations must look beyond the short-term savings and calculate the long-term consequences. Only then can they understand the real cost of every transaction and make choices that safeguard not just their economy but their future. Food is never just food. It is memory, identity, and tradition woven into every grain, spice, and recipe. What people eat tells a story about where they come from, what they value, and how they see themselves. A meal can be a history lesson, a family bond, or even an act of resistance. That is why decisions about what enters a nation's kitchen are far deeper than economic transactions. They are choices about protecting heritage and honoring identity. Every culture has its own rhythm when it comes to food. Crops grown in local soil reflect climate, geography, and centuries of agricultural wisdom. Recipes handed down through generations carry not only flavor, but lessons in resilience and adaptation. When local produce sustains a community, it strengthens more than the body. It strengthens pride. To replace this with mass imports is to risk diluting a unique identity, reducing tradition to a mere number on a trade sheet. Imported food may offer convenience or lower cost, but it often comes at the expense of authenticity. The shift is subtle at first, a change in ingredients here, a replacement of a staple there. Over time, however, cultural ties begin to loosen. The flavors that once defined a people's spirit fade into uniformity, replaced by something that feels cheaper not just in price but in meaning. Food loses its soul when it loses its connection to the land and people who created it. There is also a powerful social dimension. Farmers are more than producers. They are custodians of culture. The seeds they sow and the crops they harvest are the living link between past and present. When they thrive, traditions thrive. But when local agriculture is undermined by outside forces, it is not just livelihoods that disappear. It is songs, festivals, rituals, and the cultural heartbeat of entire communities. National dignity is also served at the table. To eat from one's own land is to affirm self-sufficiency and independence. It is a declaration that a country trusts its own farmers, its own soil, its own wisdom. A meal made from local harvests nourishes more than hunger, it nourishes confidence. It says, we do not need to rely on others for our identity. We are enough as we are. Food, then, is both survival and symbolism. It unites families, connects generations, and embodies values that no external supplier can replicate. Protecting what goes on the plate is not just about economics, but about safeguarding a legacy. It is about ensuring that every bite tells a story of resilience, pride, and belonging. When a nation chooses its own harvests over imported substitutes, it is choosing to protect the essence of who it is. And that choice, repeated daily on millions of plates, is what keeps culture alive in its most delicious and powerful form. At the heart of every thriving nation lies the quiet strength of its farmers. They are the ones who rise before dawn, who bend their backs to the soil, and who transform seeds into sustenance. Without them, cities would starve, economies would collapse, and cultures would lose their foundation. Yet too often, their contribution is overlooked, reduced to statistics in trade reports or dismissed as old-fashioned labor. The truth is, those who work the land hold immense influence, not just over food, but over freedom, resilience, and the very identity of a nation. A farmer's work is more than just agriculture. It is a living cycle of creation, connecting human survival to the rhythms of the earth. Each harvest represents months of faith, discipline, and endurance. When farmers thrive, the entire economy feels the ripple. Markets stay stable, jobs are secured, and households are fed. Their role goes beyond feeding stomachs. They feed stability itself. Consider the social fabric they weave. Rural communities built around farming are reservoirs of culture, tradition, and values. Songs sung in the fields, festivals celebrating the rains, and rituals around planting and harvest form the essence of national heritage. To support farmers is to protect this living memory, ensuring that progress does not erase the roots from which it grows. Economically, the impact is undeniable. Every locally grown crop reduces dependency on imports, strengthens domestic industries, and keeps wealth circulating within the nation. A strong farming base means resilience against global shocks, whether from price fluctuations, supply chain disruptions, or political tensions. It creates a shield of security, allowing a nation to stand firm even when the world around it shifts. There is also a profound dignity in knowing that a country feeds itself. When a people eat from their own soil, they are reminded of their capacity to endure and flourish. Farmers give nations this confidence. Each grain of rice, each kernel of corn, each bundle of wheat is not just food. It is proof of self-sufficiency. It is a message that the nation's destiny is not dictated by outside forces but cultivated from within. Supporting farmers, then, is not charity. It is strategy. It is investing in the backbone of resilience, in the protectors of identity, and in the guardians of sovereignty. Ignoring their value leads to vulnerability, but empowering them unlocks strength that no imported product can replace. The future of a nation is written in its fields. Those who nurture the soil nurture independence. Those who honor their farmers honor their own survival. And those who recognize the true influence of these silent heroes will discover that the path to strength, dignity, and freedom begins not in boardrooms or parliaments, but in the humble fields tilled by their hands. On the world stage, respect is never handed out freely. It is earned through choices, through resilience, and through the courage to act in alignment with one's values. Nations that bend too easily to external pressure are often seen as followers, not leaders. But when a country has the courage to define its own path, even if it goes against global expectations, it commands attention, and with that attention comes respect. History shows us that the most admired nations are not always the biggest or the richest. They are the ones that dared to assert their independence, to prioritize their people, and to protect their sovereignty. Standing tall means saying no when compromise threatens core values, and yes when opportunity aligns with long-term strength. It is about making choices that may be difficult in the short term, but that safeguard dignity in the long term. Economic independence is one of the clearest signals of this strength. A country that can feed itself, fuel itself, and sustain its industries without excessive reliance on outside powers sends a powerful message. Asterisk, we are capable of surviving and thriving on our own. Asterisk, this does not mean rejecting trade or cooperation, but it does mean entering into those relationships from a place of equality, not desperation. Partnerships forged on strength foster respect. Those forged on dependency foster control. There is also a psychological dimension. When a nation trusts in its own capabilities, that confidence radiates outward. Global leaders notice it, investors notice it, even rivals notice it. Confidence attracts opportunity, while dependence invites exploitation. A country that stands firm in its choices, even when questioned or criticized, earns a reputation for resilience. That reputation often translates into greater influence in negotiations, stronger alliances, and a louder voice in shaping global policies. Beyond economics and politics, there is the cultural aspect. A nation that protects its traditions, its farmers, its industries, and its way of life shows the world that it values more than just profit. It values identity. In an era of globalization, where uniformity often threatens uniqueness, preserving one's culture becomes an act of strength. And the world respects those who refuse to let their essence be diluted. Standing tall is not about arrogance, it is about self-respect. It is about knowing that bending too far for short-term gains may weaken the spine of a nation. True respect is born when others see consistency, integrity, and determination in action. Nations that compromise their values may win temporary deals, but they lose something far greater, the admiration that comes from being steadfast. Ultimately, respect flows to those who claim their own destiny. A nation that believes in its people, its land, and its potential signals to the world that it cannot be swayed like a reed in the wind. And it is this unshakable stance, visible in every choice made, that earns recognition and honor across the globe.